We are presenting 3 patients showing characteristic symptoms of stuporous catatonia. These patients have been hospitalized from 5 to 15 years. Most of the time, they seem to be oblivious of their environment. Their faces are fixed, and changes of expression, if they occur, are usually due to fantasies or voices which they hear in hallucinations.
Schizophrenia is often regarded as one of the worst mental illnesses one can develop. It currently afflicts around 24 million people, or 1 in 300, forever to change their life for the worse. There's generally considered 2 types of symptoms of schizophrenia, positive and negative. Positive symptoms include hallucinations, delusions, and rapid movements, whilst your negative symptoms consist of anhedonia, feeling no pleasure, avolition, having no motivation, and almost robotic speech. A person must have at least one positive symptom alongside any other, and they must be present for a month to gain an official diagnosis. But schizophrenia is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it's been around for thousands of years. But this is the problem. Even with millennia of prevalence, what we know has not progressed enough. Yes, we have better medications and treatments. We no longer perform some of the barbaric forms of relief that were performed only hundreds of years ago. And yes, we can provide a better quality of life for patients, but these treatments are still far from perfect, and that's just one problem, for we still do not even know what causes the condition, and it seems to be becoming more and more common. Schizophrenic-like disorders have been recorded for almost all of human history. Brief interpretations of the disease were even implied on translated ancient Egyptian texts. Many years later, Greek and Roman literature also mentioned symptoms of the disease, including that of psychosis. These descriptions would not meet modern diagnostic criteria for schizophrenia, but it does provide a good starting point in showing that the similar illnesses have been amongst the populace for thousands of years. If we fast forward to the Middle Ages, we can actually see a more renowned definition of the disorder finally surface. For example, the Canon of Medicine, the famous book by Avicenna, described a condition which meets more of the diagnostic criteria. He called it jujum mufrit, which translates to severe madness. He distinguished this from other forms of madness, such as mania, which is what most early diagnoses were. But despite the diagnostics evolving, the treatment did not. Patients would be subjected to leeching, bloodletting, or even trepanation, the drilling of holes in the skull. Little changed regarding the disorder until Dr. Emil Kraepelin finally fully distinguished between dementia praecox, what we now call schizophrenia, and manic depression, also known as bipolar disorder. It came to even more light when Eugen Bleuler found that the disorder was not in fact a type of degenerative dementia at all, leading to the renaming to schizophrenia in 1908. This remained, and the positive and negative symptoms we know of led to the disorder being included in the DSM, the book which classifies all mental disorders and is forever expanding. Yet the DSM does not include both causes of the disorder or its treatment, and since its classification, the prevalence of schizophrenia has been on the rise.
Vera, you told me another time that sometimes you hear voices talking to you, can't see the people. Does that happen often?
Yes, I think it's all day.
All day?
Yes, I don't think my head's ever been free of anybody talking.
Can you hear them now?
Since I was a young girl.
This is a woman suffering from schizophrenia. As you can see, she's displaying the textbook symptoms of the illness: avolition, anhedonia, and hallucinations as reported by the interviewer. This footage was taken in 1952, almost half a century after the first diagnosis by Bleuler. As said, we still don't really know what causes it. No one can seem to agree, not psychologists, doctors, nor scientists. Yet most do believe there is a neurological element behind the condition. For example, the woman here, psychologists would expect her to have smaller frontal lobes in her brain. They'll be reduced in size compared to controls. Now the frontal lobe itself, specifically Broca's area, is important in speech production. Shrinking it can cause gelosia, a standard symptom of schizophrenia. Another piece of research found patients have lower levels of activity in the ventral striatum. The striatum itself is associated with reward, crucial for motivation. Lower activity would pretty much guarantee avolition. Other researchers found patients have larger ventricles within their brain. These are responsible for storing the cerebrospinal fluid. They keep the brain buoyant and cushioned. With enlarged ventricles, patients often report the negative symptoms, again, alosia, avolition and anhedonia. Even the neurotransmitter dopamine is believed to play somewhat of a role. Excess dopamine may cause hyperactivity in the mesolimbic pathway, explaining the positive symptoms like hallucinations and delusions. This is exactly what's been found. Patients tend to have double the dopamine receptor density compared to controls on PET scans. They will always have more of the neurotransmitter present. So the evidence does seem valid in concluding that this is why we see schizophrenia in society, that patients become unlucky, cursed, with a different brain. But it's not that simple. What if schizophrenia gave them that brain? What if it was perfectly normal before they developed the condition? Most psychologists have adopted the view that one's cognition and one's environment can produce schizophrenia or schizophrenic symptoms in patients. In fact, Chris Frith hypothesized that such symptoms arise because of dysfunctional thought processing in a person. These patients process information in abnormal ways. For example, Frith concluded that schizophrenics are unable to see their own intentions, or the meta-representation as he called it. When patients have this deficit, they are unable to recognize their own thoughts coming from oneself. It is said that this is responsible for the auditory hallucinations and delusions. But Frith's theory too leaves us with more questions. Again, it's a chicken and an egg paradox. Another factor people believe to be associated with the disorder is genetics. Studies have found that the chance of inheriting schizophrenia from a parent is 6%, compared with 1% of the general population. Even scarier is twin studies have shown that identical monozygote twins have a 48% chance of inheritance if the other possesses the disorder, compared to just 17% for non-identical twins. But there may be other predispositions that can affect the development of schizophrenia. In a study by Reichman, it was found that most patients with schizophrenia reported what we call a schizophrenogenic mother. This is where one's mother is cold, rejecting and controlling. She creates a tense environment, high in secrecy. It can be accompanied by receiving mixed messages from parents, as well as receiving overly harsh criticism, hostility, and emotional over-involvement in the child's life.
As in the following case, where a traumatic event occurred when the child's father became depressed.
He would take her by the hand and bring her to the little wet spot and point to it and tell her that it didn't belong there. And the potty, well, once he just pushed her down so hard the potty cracked.
How did she react?
She just started crying.
All of this has the sufferer develop a poorer construction of reality. And maybe that's the missing piece of the puzzle. Many people unfortunately go through this environment, but not all develop schizophrenia. Perhaps undergoing this difficult childhood, accompanied by changes in the brain, may actually be the cause of the disease, with both components working together. This is what science has gradually accepted, but science has still not been able to derive a full cure. Even with the disorder termed in 1908, most of the treatment at the time still involved locking the poor sufferers of schizophrenia away in asylums, never to be a burden on the rest of society. Years later did we see a difference in treatment, but they still weren't good. Most patients underwent some form of shock therapy, which has drastic consequences itself. Patients would commonly suffer from memory loss, confusion, and headaches. It became a moral dilemma if it was better than the disorder. Other patients were given, sometimes unconsensual, lobotomies. This sees a doctor or surgeon insert a tool up either the nose or behind the eye, chipping away at the frontal lobe with an ice pick. It's barbaric. Only 10% of lobotomies were effective. The rest caused more damage than what they tried to alleviate and left patients in frail states, never to be the same. Now, lobotomies were still performed during this time, but 1952 is where things began to improve. The introduction of pharmaceutical medications saw progress in the treatment of symptoms. Most are antipsychotics, dopamine antagonists, which work by binding in the neurotransmitter's place at synapses, reducing the symptoms. These are what we use now, and will probably use for many years until we get something better. You see, not only can these drugs sometimes produce adverse effects, They may even exacerbate already present negative symptoms. In certain instances, some antipsychotics have even been found to be similar in efficacy to mere placebos. So yes, the progress in fully understanding schizophrenia has come a rather long way since the first descriptions written thousands of years ago, but there's still so much we don't know. Hopefully soon we'll fully understand where the disorder starts from, and then learn how to eradicate it forever. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It's free, and it really helps me out. Thank you for watching.